All right, everybody. Welcome back to the best hour of their day. Fern here. I'm going to do solo again. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about something that is largely falls in the unpleasant bucket, and that's kind of the hiring and firing. So this came up at a level two this weekend that I was working with Chuck, and he kind of put me on the spot for a Q&A with the group. And but I thought it was a relevant topic for discussion. Uh, and when now that I'm thinking about this, I think I'm gonna have one of my members come on and do an interview, and we'll walk through it a little bit more because he has far more experience. And I'm gonna say his number at this point is probably he is either done collectively between hiring and firing something between 500 to 1,000 hires and fires. And so he's got an incredible amount of experience in there. But I do want to give you guys my perspective on that. And it's shifted over the years, and none of this is hard and fast. Obviously, with regard to firing, there are some hard and fast rules, meaning if somebody does something unethical, if they steal, if they're sleeping with the help, all that stuff, like if they're doing things that you would be embarrassed to tell your mother about, then probably firing is in order. But we will get to that. So first, what I would tell you is my position has switched over the years, and I am largely, I wouldn't say I'm fast on firing, but excuse me, fast on hiring, but I'm much faster than I used to be on hiring. And I think the big takeaway with that is, regardless of what your process is, whatever your filter looks like, you're never going to get it right all the time. So don't put all your eggs in this basket of this perfectly thought out process that's going to give you this immaculate end state at the end, because you will get it wrong. You will get it wrong eventually, and that's largely because we're all flawed, but it's also because of the nature of hiring. And I had somebody tell me once before that, when somebody tries out or they do an interview, it's deceiving, and we have to realize that, like, that is the best that we're ever going to see of them. That is the best version of them you are ever going to get. So in that instance, if it is not really, really good, that's probably an easy no. And you can kind of fire this person before you end up firing them for something else later on down the road, because they just put on you know, their Sunday best for the interview and didn't show you all the stuff they had in the closet. And so largely, I would say do both quickly, and because you can just correct all the time. Now, with regard to hiring, I think before you do anything, I think there's probably, if I'm looking back on it, there's like several relevant questions that I think need to be asked. And the first one is, do you need to hire? So if it's just you and you're a one man band, depending on the number of athletes you have in the gym, you need to figure out, A, do I need to hire anybody? Because if I'm just starting this up and I'm trying to keep my costs down, then you're going to have to do everything yourself, and that's okay, because you need to develop some level of competency in all of those things anyway. And if you don't have a ton of members, then guess what? You're in luck. You're not super busy anyway, so just continue to do everything, but have a plan for hiring. Once you do get to that point, and again, this is relative, there's probably a sliding scale in this for when you should hire people. You need to figure out what you're going to hire for. So what am I hiring, or who am I hiring? And you basically kind of have two buckets with regard to who I'm going to hire. So there's kind of administrative roles and tasks within the business, and then there's coaching. And I would tell you, in my experience, most gym owners were probably coaches and then had a passion for CrossFit, and then they opened a gym. So kind of coach is their thing, and they're probably one of the better coaches on the floor. So you should continue to coach. So in those instances, it is generally, not always, it is generally better if that person looks and starts to seek out help on the admin side before they do anything else. So I would take a look at, okay, if I'm going to be on the floor and that's where I'm best utilized, what are the admin functions that I can hire for first, right? And the reality is, like, the admin side of the house, let's say they have if you're running 5 to 7 classes a day, you have anything between 100 to 135 classes a month. That's a lot of hours. Admin is generally cheaper to pay for, and it generally requires less total time on the calendar than coaching does, particularly when you're a startup or a new gym. So admin is generally your probably better option, and you just need to figure out like what those admin functions are that you want to get rid of first. And I would tell you, like most things like scheduling, inputting stuff into the website, and scheduling is probably not even a thing if you're the only person. So that's not even a function you have to worry about. That's only really becomes an issue as the team grows. So then you're looking at like website input, maybe doing some social media posts, um, account or member account maintenance. So all of those things collectively in any given gym, I don't know, 6 hours a week, let's just call it 10 hours a week, 2 hours a day doing admin functions, which is very realistic. Most of them don't really take that long if you just sit down and jam for 2 hours. You can outsource that. You can bring in somebody, pay them, $20 an hour or something like that. Maybe 15, 10, depending on what it is that you can afford, and then start offloading those things. And a lot of these things, if you can find a VA, so a virtual assistant who can do this for the right price, you can outsource that to somebody and avoid the whole kind of HR thing just right out of the gate, and not even worry about that. You can just deal with somebody virtually who you can give access to your Wodify account, you can give them access to your email, and then you just create protocols with that person. And I played around with this in the past, and there is some kind of irony out in that process when you're looking for a VA to do things, because they're not all great. They're like anything else. There's not all great CrossFit coaches, not all great doctors, and there's also not all great VAs. But if you can find VAs that can help you, they can be a tremendous help, because they're usually very admin savvy, and they can do most things that would take us an hour in 20 minutes, because that's just what they do all day. They're a VA because that is their super skill. So if you can do that, generally I would give them like the immediate functions that probably cause you pain points and that probably don't have significant impact on the business, meaning like they're not going to be managing money or anything like that. And then what you do is you kind of give them some preset parameters, be like, this is how it's done. If you want to put in redundancies of any type, for instance, if it was email communication that you want them to take over, pretty simple kind of fix or kind of means for oversight is have them BCC you or blind carbon copy on you any response that they do to anybody. That way you can see all of the correspondence. And because most VAs, if you don't know this, you do have to coach them. Like you're gonna have to coach them on how you want things done and when and where and all that stuff. So look into that. There's a ton of different, I'm not going to go through any VA services, but like, you can do a lot of that stuff, and you can find them that are really, really good. And there are actually VAs out there who kind of specialize in the CrossFit space. So they know all how to do Wodify and push press and Zen Planner, and all that stuff. So you can look at that and maybe go that route. If you're going to bring somebody in, then again, you still need to look at all of those functions. And the first thing you do before you hire anybody is you need to make a job description and probably have a coach contract. So you can't just bring somebody in and be like, hey, you're going to do this. A couple of things you have to have in there is I need to have all of the specifics about what it is that they're going to do, right? So I need the who, what, when, where, and why. I need who it is that I'm looking for with regard to the job. Then from there, I need who do they report to. So they can't just come in and just never report to anybody. They need to have like specific, report to you on certain things. When do they need to report? What do they need to report? And how do they need to report it? So for instance, if they're going to report things to you, let's just say it's admin functions and you want monthly metrics pushed to you on a weekly basis. You would say, hey, you're going to pull these reports. This is exactly how you pull them. I want you to export them to Excel spreadsheet. I want you to put them in an email. And then I want you to take this template in the body or the text body of the email and highlight those things in there with the numbers in there. And I want those reports sent to me at 8:15 every Wednesday. Unless I tell you otherwise. And that's pretty clear. They know what they're supposed to do. They know who they're supposed to give it to. They know when they're supposed to give it to you, and they know how to do it. This is generally how you avoid big problems, because firings generally tend to happen because there was expectation issues, and we'll talk about that when we get to the firing. But usually people are just like, I don't want to do this. You take it. and there's not a ton of real clear guidance there, and that becomes a really, really big problem in the long term because that's my fault for not really, really outlining that and how that's supposed to happen. So, in my experience, in a lot of instances, the admin stuff is the first thing you should take off your plate, because when people are getting burned out, it's because they're doing both. So if you're getting back 10 hours a week, you're probably okay to coach 15 to 25 classes a week, particularly if there's gaps in between those. Um, so if you're going to do that, I highly recommend looking at the admin side of the house, and then looking at both in-house and VA functions, if that's something you're interested in. But again, don't go into this with rose-colored glasses and think you're just going to dump a bunch of stuff on a VA and they're just going to do it. Both of these scenarios are going to require very clear expectations, probably some sort of outline, and doing that stuff. Now, when you're talking about creating a job description, you can look most of this stuff out, but it's basically like a list of tasks that they would have to do, what the job requires, all of that stuff. And then when you're training them, if you want to do that, if you guys have not looked up, most of this admin stuff is like it's all done in a computer, which means you don't have to write an SOP, right? So that's I don't know, this is 2020 almost. You don't need to write an SOP. If you guys are not familiar with Loom, so Loom is just an online platform, and there's an app for it too. There's an app for your desktop and app for your phone as well. But it's basically just a screen capture. It's kind of like QuickTime, but Loom is a little interesting because it does screenshot and kind of like screen in screen video of you. So as I'm walking through something that would, I don't know, building a membership in Wodify or something like that. It's going to have a screenshot of you in the corner, and you can move that around. But what this allows you to do is it allows you to take some of the intricacies that can be problematic with some of these processes and really walk them out on screen, and verbally you can talk about it. You can tell people that, hey, this little toggle switch is not really as intuitive and easy to find as it may seem. It's right over here in the corner. You're going to hit this, it'll drop down, and this is how you'll go from there. The other beautiful thing about that is it records everything and gives you links there, so you don't have to download files for this. So like in QuickTime, I'm going to do a recording. It's going to give me a file that I now have to take and transport to something like Vimeo or YouTube. Loom is just going to it's just going to share it to that website, and then that is now a link that you can post somewhere and be like, here's how you build memberships, watch this video. So you can start handing those functions off if you're going to do admin first. And that's what I would tell you first is if you're in that position where you're like looking to hire, then I would do the admin first. And I forgot to mention this before, but the first thing you should be looking for is like, can you afford it? And if you can't afford it, then guess what? You're stuck like Chuck, and you should still be doing that. But then what you need to figure out is like roughly what's it going to cost me to do this. If it's $400 to $500, as soon as you can hit that revenue number, you should have all this stuff lined out, and you can start going through the vetting process and figure out if I can hand that off, free up 10 hours, and then I'm just going to move on to the next process. And the good thing about those things is, with regard to like having to potentially take those back in the event of some sort of like financial catastrophe, you could probably keep those as a pretty low hanging fruit. Or in pretty minimal cost, because if that's the issue and you need to be out on the floor more, like you're going to want to be out on the floor as much as possible. So now on the other hand, if you have got all that covered and you want to hire new coaches, that's a little bit of a different ball game. And there's probably two tracks in my mind, and this is one where I think most CrossFit gyms do it, I'll say less than ideal, in a less than ideal scenario. And what they do is they do a ton of assumption. They don't do any vetting, or they're overly critical and married to their process, that they have this perfect onboarding and on-ramp process, and they're going to get this perfect product on the back end. I just not really sure that's a thing. And I think, you should be prepared to do both. And so with the admin stuff, that's usually just a quick interview in my mind. Be like, does this person have the background? Is this something that falls into their skill set? And then if it checked both of those boxes, then I'm probably going to bring that person on, because those are the easiest ones to like. It's not a ton of work. It's generally like part time, and it's easy to take back if you need to. Coaching is a little bit different because that's a personal interaction on the floor. However, most people, I've seen people have like a 12-month intern process, and I'm not sure. I mean, if that works for you, great. I'm not hating on it, but you might be in a position where you might need to bring somebody on sooner. So, um, there's probably like two tracks. So I have somebody that has no experience and somebody that is experienced. And if you're not planning for both, I think there's this weird assumption that people can only come from in the community in a lot of CrossFit gyms, and I just don't think that's the case. I think as the CrossFit community matures, there's going to be coaching opportunities as we all get better at business and we can hire outside, and that's probably a really, really good thing. I would hope to think that, if myself or somebody else who has been working on seminar staff for several years was looking for a job opportunity, that you probably wouldn't require that they go through a full 3 to 6 month internship. I would, however, expect that there is some degree of vetting, meaning they have to do some sort of interview. There might be some sort of trial period with regard to all of that. So I think you should be set up for both. And you do need to screen everybody. You need to make sure, you check all your, P's and Q's, cross all your T's, dot all your I's as far as like what it is that you're looking for, what they're going to be responsible for, and then what their job entails. And then I need to see, like, are they good enough? And that's a pretty simple test, meaning like they can come in and they can do an in-person interview and sit down and be like, do I even like you? Because if I don't like you, well, then I'm sure shit not going to hire you. But then from there, you can do some controlled environment coaching where I maybe have them coach 5 or 6 athletes and I give them some stuff to do. And you're going to have a pretty good idea of where their skill set lies by simply watching something like that. And then one level past that, maybe I have them come in and guest coach and I just see if I like what they got going on. And then ask them, like, some, typical interview questions. But I think the hiring process is, I think we all like to think that we have like the greatest eye for, human beings and all that stuff. And you're going to get it wrong. I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to get it wrong. And that kind of leads me into the next piece, which is the firing aspect. And firing sucks. I think anybody that enjoys firing people is a huge asshole. And I've done pretty much all of it. I've had to let people go in other professions, lay people off. I've had to do, firings for a cause, and people absolutely deserve to be fired. We've had to let people go that we didn't want to let go in certain scenarios. It all sucks, and there is no sugarcoating that. Like, there's nothing cool about sitting across from somebody else, even somebody who has wronged you in some instances, and saying, we are no longer in need of your services. And it's just a bummer, right? Because you probably have some degree of relationship with this person, particularly if it's in a micro gym or CrossFit gym. You've probably developed some sort of a relationship, and then you have to break that relationship, and it generally will not be mended. In my experience, we might be amicable, but we're not going to be friends afterwards. So you just have to know that going in. Now, some ways you can kind of make this easier for yourself, and the first thing is, like, why are we having this conversation about firing somebody? And I think that one usually gets skipped over. And like I said, there's the easy ones. There's so-and-so stole, or, they did something completely unethical and negligent, in the sense that, like, no mindful, logical human being would have done that. And we've come to the conclusion that this is probably not the place for you. That's the easy stuff. That's not the stuff anybody's really worried about. It's all the other ones that are kind of passive aggressive. People become, I don't know, so kind of like non-confrontational, but, passive aggressive at the same time, while like, you guys all know what I'm talking about. They send, snide emails and, like gently poking other coaches in the eye, stuff like that. Like, that stuff starts to rear its head. And it's not that they've done anything wrong, but they generally have like these mild conflicts with either the staff or the members. It happens, right? There's just kind of this bug that keeps getting dropped in your ear that so-and-so is, somewhat of a turd. But again, so the question is, why is this going on? And generally it is because me or you as the leader or the boss has not created the appropriate expectation. And I said this at the seminar when I got asked the question. And I know this sounds absolutely ridiculous, but if you do not tell people you will be fired for doing X, Y, and Z, they probably assume that it's okay. And it's not. So you have to tell people that. If you steal, you will be fired. If you show up late for class, you get one warning because we've all done that. If you miss multiple classes, you're going on a 1 month vacation and then you have to do that. So if you have contracts in place that outline what they're supposed to do, and if they sign it, well, everything's really easy at that point. And then if people don't want to sign it, then they don't work for you. Remember, this is not something where like the person who is in there doing that, like it's not really a negotiation. Like they either sign it or they don't. They don't really have an option because they're the one looking for the job. You don't have to give them the job. They don't have to take it. So just get coach contracts in place if at all possible, because it just really makes everything really clear. Because when they break the rules that were clearly outlined in the contract, then you can just reference that instead of having this weird pissing contest about like, I like the way that I do it more than I like the way that you do it, and that makes you a bad person. That just makes you a crappy leader and doesn't help you have an objective conversation. Now, with regard to the expectations, here's where I have fallen short on many, many occasions, and here's where most of us fall short, and that is there's difference between setting expectation and enforcing expectation. And most people don't have a problem setting expectation when compared to enforcing expectation. It's cool to say, hey, we show up on time. It's much more difficult to say, if you show up late, I'm going to take you off the schedule for a month, and then they show up late, and then you actually have to take them off the schedule for a month. So if you're going to do that, the biggest thing you can do is you have to set that standard, because typically once you set the standard, everybody will abide. Once people realize that there are repercussions for their actions, they tend to get in line. When problems tend to start creeping up and rearing their head, it's because the standard is no longer being enforced. This is no different than people who kind of shave reps in the gym. It's just like, as long as you let them do that, and you kind of like don't either not acknowledge it or just kind of call them out and go over there and count their reps and do stuff like that, then they'll do it. You know, it's no different than judging an athlete at the games. They will take what you give them. So if they don't abide by the standard, the best bet as a judge is like, I don't feel bad. You just gotta have to take that rep, and then guess what? They all fall in line very, very quickly because they're professionals and they want to win. And your coaches are largely the same. Like, nobody wants to be fired. Nobody wakes up in the morning and is like, man, I can't wait to really suck at doing the thing that I like today. And it's usually because we just didn't set the expectation. So we really have to set the expectation of what is expected, and then we have to enforce it. And enforcing it can be very, very difficult, and have hard conversations. You need to have hard conversations frequently. Don't avoid them. If there's a problem, nip it in the bud. If you hear something, you know, the water cooler stuff going on, pull people in, find out the exact specifics about it, and address it head on. The best way to avoid problems in your gym is to squash any sort of drama as fast as humanly possible. And that means you're going to have some hard conversations. You're going to have to do some fact finding. You're going to have to do some research. You're going to have to get everything together. You're going to have to put all that stuff. And then you're going to have to sit down with so-and-so and be like, this is what I know. Is there anything that I don't know with regard to this? And then they'll either give you yes or give you no. And then you go from there and determine what needs to go on from there. But usually when this happens is because I either didn't set the expectation, or I got lax with enforcing the expectation, and people started really kind of running away with themselves and kind of doing whatever they want. And then when you decide you're going to fire somebody, just fire them quickly and don't make it an ordeal. One of the weird questions I get on a regular basis is, should I send an email out to the member base? And the answer is a no. No, it doesn't matter. Like, it's none of their business. And I know you're like, well, but the members really like them. Listen, I'm telling you, I've fortunately only had to let 2 employees go, and they were both for cause, in 10 years. I didn't send an email about either one of them. And eventually people will ask, or they won't ask. And you'd be surprised how many people will not ask. They're just going to assume that so-and-so went away, but you do not need to make drama out of something that doesn't need to be drama. And the reality is that's not how it works in the real world. If I worked at Starbucks, you know, I'm not going to make an announcement to all of my customers that Johnny, the barista, got fired. Johnny's just not going to be there tomorrow when I go get coffee. And so is not going to be there tomorrow when the 6 a.m. kicks off. It's going to be somebody else. People might ask. You can just say very politely, we parted ways. So you don't need to do that. Who does need to know is the staff. And they need to know as much as they need to know. And that's going to be up for you to determine. But when you're firing, fire quickly and just move on. It doesn't need to be this ordeal. In both instances, again, I fired both for cause, and it was a non-issue moving forward. It was a thing for about 30 minutes, and everybody's like, okay, cool, moving on. Um, excuse me. The members, there might be some fear that the members might leave for the coach, and largely if you're doing your job, they're far more attached to your gym and you than they are to the coach. And if they are attached to the coach, then that's a different conversation altogether. And I'm not even saying that's a bad thing, but it is a different conversation altogether. So, um, but that's kind of my experience with it. I think you should I think you should hire probably a little bit faster than you do if you need it. But the first question you should be asking yourself is like, do I need to hire? What do I need to hire for? And am I prepared to hire? Am I ready to take somebody on to take this role? And then when you're firing, like, why am I firing? Is this my fault or is this their fault? And that's not to say that you can't fire somebody if it's your fault. And I mean your fault in the sense that you did not lead well. You didn't set the expectation. You need to make sure they understood what was supposed to happen and when and why and all those things. You can still fire people for that. And in the contract, it should say what you can and can't fire people for. And largely, for the most part, particularly if they're 1099s, you can fire people for pretty much anything. So that is my 2 cents on that. It was a question that came up, and I think a lot of people struggle with that because it sucks. Like I said, if you enjoy firing people, you're a gigantic asshole, and that's weird. So, hiring and firing, if you guys got questions, please hit us up. And if you have not asked somebody who has a ton of experience with this, do that. I guarantee you have a member in your gym who works for a large company or owns a company who has significant amount of experience with this, who will help guide you through that process. I know in the past I have always leaned on a couple very specific people who are very well versed in this, who have been my litmus test and the person that I bounce ideas off of when this stuff comes up because they lived it already. So you don't have to go through it. CrossFit gyms are not special. You're going to hire and fire people just like everybody else. And there's people that do that really, 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 really well. So reach out, ask for help. But again, hopefully you're getting to the point where you definitely have to hire people. Eventually you're going to have to fire people. So it's not something you should put your head in the sand over. But that's all I got for today. I hope this was helpful. If you guys have questions, hit me up. Hit us in the DM. Hit me up on the DM, jfern3 on IG. And we'll see you next time. See ya.
Thanks for listening to Best Hour of Their Day. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. How cool is that? There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, so it becomes super simple. Some of these episodes with Fern or Todd or myself chatting with one another, we've done right within the app itself. Anchor will make it easy to distribute your podcast to all platforms, Spotify, Apple, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make an awesome podcast in one place. All you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Come on, who doesn't have Spotify at this point? And if you were unaware, Spotify now is offering podcasts. That's right. On Spotify, you can listen to all your favorite artists, but also podcasts in one place for free. Spotify has a huge catalog of podcasts on every topic, including the one you're listening to right now, Best Hour of Their Day. On Spotify, you can follow your favorite podcasts so you never miss an episode. Premium users can even download episodes to listen to offline wherever you are, something I always do before I hop on a plane. And you can even easily share what you're listening to with your friends on Instagram and other social media platforms. Here's the deal. If you haven't done so already, be sure to download the Spotify app, search for Best Hour of Their Day on Spotify, or browse some other podcasts if you want. You can find them in your library tab. And also make sure to follow me so you never miss an episode of Best Hour of Their Day. Thanks again for listening to Best Hour of Their Day. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, one more time, please leave us a review on Apple Podcast and send us any feedback you have to @besthouroftheirday on Instagram and besthouroftheirday@gmail.com if you want to shoot us an email. We appreciate you. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your day.